The North American blizzard of 2016, also referred to as Winter Storm Jonas, was a hit on the heart of the US and its people. The giant snowstorm came to touch the ground of the eastern United States from January 22nd to January 24th, 2016, making the worst out of the land. The eastern United States has been begging for life in front of the snow swirl for 2 days. Snow ranging from 20 to 30 inches has fallen on several states of the US, where people could see death in front of them. In some places, it went up to 40 inches, making it even worse. The storm was a result of an interaction between a low-pressure system moving through the southeastern United States and a cold Arctic air mass. The wind accompanied it, exceeding 50 miles per hour in some areas, which could destroy anything in its path. The storm also caused flooding in states like New Jersey and Delaware. For 3 days and 1,000 miles, the North American blizzard froze everything owned by the people of Washington, D.C., New York City, and Baltimore. But how did this storm bring cities to a standstill? The storm affected approximately 85 million people in 26 states of the US, making them question their own existence. Highways connecting major cities were buried in snow, making it difficult to transport essentials. Rail systems completely seized for a couple of days, and ports were also shut, putting a full stop to imports and exports. Power and communication systems were shut down, making it hard for people to check on each other or access emergency services. The total damage caused by the storm was estimated at around $3 billion. Coastal communities were the most vulnerable group of people who had to deal with the storm directly. Even their houses and utilities were destroyed by the uninvited guest. However, the storm did expose the vulnerabilities in infrastructure and emergency response systems and urged for necessary measures. Meteorologists could predict the storm days before just because of advanced weather forecasting technology, but it could still make a city stand still. It cited the importance of techniques to remove snow from buildings, such as de-icing. The lack of defense mechanisms in the coastal region was addressed through flood shields, flood walls, etc. Even though major cities like New York and Washington, D.C. had emergency response teams, it was not the case for others. The state started promoting community resilience and awareness through campaigns that stressed the need for cooperation and unity. The country also developed apps and systems that monitor snow accumulation and provide real-time updates. The North American blizzard of 2016 was a landmark weather event that shook the world. But it was also a World Adermark event that kicked off a new phase of early warnings and coordinated responses that can reduce casualties. The US will never forget the chaos brought by the Great Blizzard of 1978. The extraordinary snowfall and fierce wind are still stuck in people's minds. It took place between January 25th and January 27th, 1978, and it has gone straight to history. The storm resulted from the merging of a low-pressure system from the Gulf of Mexico and an Arctic front moving southward, resulting in catastrophe on the US coast. In some areas, 40 inches of snow covered anything that was standing still. The wind came along with it at a speed of 50 to 70 miles per hour, creating the perfect conditions for snowdrifts up to 25 feet tall. As the central pressure dropped to 28.28 inches of mercury, it was categorized as a Category 2 hurricane. But what made this blizzard so unforgettable? It was, of course, the price the people had to pay for their lives and their belongings. Over 100 people lost their lives due to hypothermia, accidents, etc., while some towns were completely isolated for days without any basic utilities. Highways, roads, and railways were buried, and it was hard to travel anywhere. Major airports were also shut down for safety. Floods along the coastlines destroyed houses and infrastructure. The storm caused an estimated $520 million in damages, which was a setback for the US. The level of unpreparedness the storm exposed was grave. Despite having early warnings, the state could not keep a hold of the storm's sheer strength and development. And that's where the weather preparedness took the front seat. Understanding its importance, the government should fund accurate weather models and timely warnings through advanced meteorology. Infrastructure resilience was enhanced through snow removal equipment, power grid hardening, etc. Considering the vulnerability of coastal regions, the importance of flood defense came for discussion, and measures like seawalls were adopted. Emergency response improvements and improvisation of evacuation protocols were other steps that were taken. The Great Blizzard of 1978 remains an unforgettable incident, but it was also a reminder that man is no powerful than nature. The February 1972 Iran blizzard was one of the deadliest snowstorms ever recorded in Iran's history. It had a grave impact on rural and urban areas across the country, and people had to beg for their lives. But how did this catastrophic event unfold? The blizzard was the result of a combination of cold air masses from Serbia and moisture from the Persian Gulf, causing snow over Iran, one of the least expected regions. Lack of preparedness only added more casualties to it. Unlike many blizzards, which last only a day or two, the Iran blizzard showed its power for nearly a week. In those days, Iran was buried under as much as 26 feet of snow, which is said to be extreme. The conditions were perfect for hypothermia as the temperature hiked to negative 25 degrees Celsius. Over 4,000 people had to lose their lives in the hands of snow. Many were abandoned in their houses without food, water, and medical care. Snowplows and machinery were not enough to remove the snow accumulated on the highways and railways. The livestock and agriculture of rural farmers were swept off, leaving behind snow. The after effects of the storm included grave poverty that killed even more. This catastrophic event revealed Iran's vulnerability in terms of infrastructure and technology. Taking lessons from it, they started implementing effective measures. That included an accurate early warning system that allowed people to prepare. Meteorological research and international collaborations were also given immense importance after the incident. Infrastructure resilience was also given prime care, which included improved construction standards and snow removal capabilities. It was a good way to prepare for high-impact scenarios rather than low-probability scenarios, with a preference for rural areas as they are most vulnerable. The Iran blizzard of 1972 was a tragic event in history, but it did urge the world to think outside the box for better preparedness and infrastructure resilience. The storm of the century tested the patience of the US between March 12th and March 15th, 1993. For the destruction it caused, it is considered to be one of the most significant and devastating weather events in United States history. The storm resulted from a clash between cold Arctic air and warm Gulf moisture in the Gulf of Mexico, catering to a low-pressure system dropping up to 960 millibars. It spread from the Gulf of Mexico to Canada, covering nearly the entire eastern coastal region of the US and parts of Central America. It delivered snow of size up to 60 inches in places like Mount LeConte in Tennessee. It was accompanied by wind reaching up to 70 miles per hour in coastal areas and even exceeded 100 miles per hour in some locations. Now, what were the widespread effects of this massive weather system? The storm took around 270 lives across the US, Canada, and Cuba, which was a result of hypothermia, accidents, etc. Many people were forced out of their houses due to flooding or lack of heat. Power was outraged for many days while people were stranded at their houses. Highways and railways were also buried in the snow. Over 25% of the nation's flights were grounded due to safety reasons. Coastal towns in Florida and Alabama were affected the most by floods, where beach erosion caused property damage. Total damages exceeded $10 billion, making it one of the costliest storms in history at the time. But it was an incident that underscored the importance of advanced forecasting. Steps were taken to provide accurate early warnings that would predict the storm several days in advance, making it easy for people to take precautionary steps. Major investments were made in satellite and computer model advancements for such predictions. Infrastructure improvements were also discussed. The government adopted underground communication systems that can withstand storms. Improved snow removal equipment and emergency vehicle access plans were also implemented. Community awareness campaigns were conducted to make people aware of emergency preparedness, including stockpiling supplies. The storm of the century in 1993 was a defining moment for meteorology and disaster management. It was a keystone to an era of increasing climate unpredictability. The New York City blizzard of 1888, also known as the Great Blizzard of 1888, was one of the most severe weather events in the history of the US. The storm was enough to make New York stand still from March 11th to March 14th, 1888. The storm affected the Northeast from Maryland to Maine, particularly breaking the heart of New York. New York was buried in 20 to 30 inches of snow. The blizzard was accompanied by wind reaching up to 80 miles per hour, making the situation even worse. The storm claimed around 400 lives, 200 of which were from the city of New York. Thousands of people were stranded in homes and workplaces without food and water. Highways and railway lines were also buried in snow, making transportation difficult or maybe impossible. The frozen East River was not potent enough to provide ferry services. However, the storm's widespread destruction was a turning point for resilient infrastructure. Weather-resistant urban infrastructure became the need of the hour and a better future. Plans for New York City's subway system were sped up after the catastrophe. Underground tunnels became part of railroads to deal with future weather disruptions. Underground power lines became the new normal as they would be less affected by storms. In addition, the snow clearing protocols were also improvised to make them more effective. The New York City blizzard of 1888 can be said to have reshaped urban infrastructure and emergency management, leaving no gap for errors. The Chicago blizzard of 1967 is still remembered for its scale, intensity, and aftermath destruction. It remained in action from January 26th to 27th, 1967, Michigan to carve the heart out of Chicago and its people. Chicago was buried in 23 inches of snow, making the worst out of it. Snow drifts reach a height of 4 to 6 feet, which was considered to be destructive. Strong winds of 50 miles per hour made the blizzard even more dangerous. A number of people had to leave their houses for life while the snow was burying their houses. Now, what challenges did residents face during this historic storm? For the residents of Chicago, it was a nightmare. Many of them were abandoned in their houses, workplaces, and even cars, running out of food and water. As power lines and communication were disrupted, it was hard to reach out to people, even for medical emergencies. The anxiety and stress that they deal with were enough to test them with post-traumatic stress. But was it the time to give up? Taking note of their sufferings, the Chicago government devised some measures that can enhance emergency preparedness and make it more effective. Understanding the importance of planning, people were urged to stock food to meet their needs. Snow removal plans were also standardized, while weather forecasting was also given immense importance. Transportation systems that can withstand snow were invested in while keeping community involvement in mind. It was a storm that swept anything and everything out of Atlantic Canada, especially Newfoundland, in February 1947. The extraordinary snowfall and fierce wind remain a nightmare in the history of the region. The storm delivered snow of size around 24 inches, with drifts reaching up to 15 meters in some places. The wind accompanied by the storm was of speed around drifts reaching up to 15 meters or 75 miles per hour, resulting in cold wind chills. Coastal areas were hit hard by high winds and ice accumulation along shoreline. The storm claimed dozens of lives, mostly because of hypothermia. Roads were buried under snowdrifts, making travel nearly impossible. Trains were disrupted as railway lines were covered in snow. Entire towns and villages were buried under deep snow, keeping them isolated. Ice accumulation led to power outages and complete disruption of communication systems. But how did people cope with the harsh conditions? Unity was the major thing that kept them motivated and strong. Neighbors worked together to remove the snow and clear pathways. They stockpiled food and essentials together to sustain the harsh winter. Government assistance played a crucial role in keeping the residents' hope alive. In some cases, supplies were delivered via air to towns that were isolated completely. Some regions also held community gatherings to keep the liveliness high. Storytelling, games, etc. were ways to build psychological resilience in people and build trust that they would overcome this hurdle too. The importance of preparedness and weather forecasting was underscored in this. Actions were taken to advance meteorology and preparedness. Investments were made in building infrastructure resilience, including winter-proofing homes, snow removal equipment, etc. Coordinated government and military efforts took the front seat thereafter to bring the communities together as one to withstand the madness of nature. The Great Blizzard struck the U.S. Great Plains in the most unexpected way in 1886. It is known as one of the deadliest blizzards in American history for the suffering it caused the Native Americans and their livelihoods. The Arctic air visited the plain, with temperatures as low as negative 34 degrees Celsius. The major portions of the U.S. Great Plains were buried in snow, with drifts reaching up to 20 feet in places. Regions like Montana, Wyoming, Nebraska, and the Dakotas were the most affected by this madness. It had devastating effects on the livestock of this region. Around 50 to 80% of the cattle population was died that winter. Many settlers and travelers died of severe cold, while some surrendered to starvation. Railroads were completely shut, taking travel out of the picture. Native American tribes had to run away from their homelands for life, and resource scarcity was another reason for this. The incident underscored the importance of durable and permanent shelter that can protect you from the extremes of water and wind. The disaster also urged farmers to look for better management of their livestock and diversification of farming. The people of Native America realized the importance of preparedness and started the practice of stockpiling, etc. Railroad resilience, such as snow clearing equipment, was also a part of the planning. Most importantly, understanding the changing scenario of nature became the primary step to dealing with it. Which blizzard story impacted you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know if you'd like to see a part 2 exploring more blizzard events. Join us next time as we delve deeper into the events that have shaped our world, because every blizzard has a story worth telling.